Hello and welcome to study session number 27 of Daily Memory Lab. In today's study session, let us talk about Supply Under GST, round 4. We will be completing the entire chapter, round 4, the last couple of pages, and then we will go to round 3 of charge of GST 3.34, and then we will go to round 2 of whatever we studied yesterday, and then we will study maybe around 6 to 7 new pages today. On that note, let us begin with the first target for the day, supply under GST, the last couple of pages. Mixed supplies and composite supplies. Mixed supplies and composite. Yeah, composite supply we discussed yesterday. Now let us talk about mixed supply. Mixed supply means two or more individual supplies of goods or services or any combination thereof made in conjunction with each other by a taxable person for a single price where such supply does not constitute a composite supply. Section 2, clause 74. How to determine if a particular supply is a mixed supply? In order to identify if the particular supply is a mixed supply, the first requisite is to rule out that the supply is a composite supply. A supply can be a mixed supply only if it is not a composite supply. As a corollary, it can be said that if the transaction consists of supplies not naturally bundled in the ordinary course of business, then the possibility of it being a mixed supply needs to be checked. Once the amenability of the transaction as a composite supply is ruled out and a single consideration is charged for the entire supply of different components, it would be treated as a mixed supply. Classified in terms of supply of goods or supply of services attracting the highest rate of tax. A supply of a package consisting of canned foods, sweets, chocolates, cakes, dry fruits, aerated drink and fruit juices, when supplied for a single price, is a mixed supply. Each of these items can be supplied separately and is not dependent on each other. It shall not be a mixed supply if these items are supplied separately or separate prices are charged. A shopkeeper selling storage water bottles along with refrigerator for a single price. Bottles and the refrigerator can be easily priced, sold independently and are not naturally bundled. So such supplies are mixed supplies. A house is given on rent through a single rent deed, one floor of which is to be used as residence and the other for housing a printing press at a lump sum rent amount. Such renting for two different purposes is not naturally bundled in the ordinary course of business. The said supplies are mixed supply. And how to determine the tax liability on mixed supplies? A mixed supply comprising of two or more supplies shall be treated as supply of that particular supply that attracts highest rate of tax. Shringar Enterprises supplies 10,000 kits at 50 rupees each, amounting to rupees 5 lakh to Raghav General Store. Each kit consists of one shampoo, one face wash, one kajal pencil. It is a mixed supply and is treated as supply of that particular supply which attracts highest rate of tax. Assuming that the rate of tax applicable on shampoo is 18% on face wash, shampoo is 18%, on face wash is 28%, and on kajal pencil it is 12%. In the given case, highest rate of tax, which is 28%, will be charged on the entire value of 5 lakh. Okay, more than one supply made together and taxed at the individual rates. There can also be a case where an activity or transaction involves more than one supply of goods or services or both, but neither they are composite supplies nor can be categorized as mixed supplies, and that is, all supplies carry independent significance. In such a case, separate consideration is indicated against each supply. Each such supply shall be charged at the respective rate applicable to that particular supply. In case of servicing of our cars involving supply of both goods, spare parts and services, where the value of goods and services are shown separately, The goods and services would be liable to tax at the rates applicable to such goods and services separately. Just Current supplies gift packages at 30 each to its customers. Each package consists of two chocolates, two fruit juice bottles, and a packet of toy balloons. Rates of GST applicable on chocolates, fruit juice bottles, and toy balloons are 18%, 12%, 5% respectively. Jaskaran is liable to pay GST at the highest rate, 18% on the entire package. So the first thing, okay, so on that note, we have completed this discussion. Let's go to the next step, next segment. Round 3 of charge of GST, 34 to 38, page number 34. When a consumer places, okay, where in which segment we are in tax payable on e-commerce by the e-commerce on notified services. E-commerce operator is any person who owns, operates, manages an electronic platform for supply of goods, services, or both. Sometimes e-commerce operator itself supplies the goods or services or both through its electronic portal. However, many a times the products, services displayed on the electronic commerce portal are actually supplied by some other person to the consumer. When a consumer places an order for a particular product or service on this electronic portal, the actual supplier supplies the selected product or service to the consumer. The price or consideration for the product or service is collected by the e-commerce operator from the consumer and passed on to the actual supplier after the deduction of commission by the e-commerce operator. The government may, on the recommendations of the GST Council, notify specific categories of services the tax on supplies of which shall be paid by the e-commerce operator if such services are supplied through it. Such services shall be notified on the recommendations of the GST Council. Notification number 17 2017 dated 28/6/2017, notification number 14 2017 dated 28/6/2017 as amended has notified the following categories of services supplied through e-commerce for this purpose: service by way of transportation of passengers by a radio taxi, motor cab, maxi cab, motorcycle, or any other motor vehicle except omnibus; services by way of transportation of passengers by an omnibus except where the person supplying such service through e-commerce operator is a company; services by way of providing accommodation in hotels, inns, guest houses, clubs, campsites, or other commercial planes meant for residential or lodging purposes, except where the person supplying such service through electronic commerce operator is liable for registration under section 22 subsection 1. Services by way of housekeeping such as plumbing, carpenting, etc., except where the person supplying such service through e-commerce operator is liable for registration under section 22 subsection 1. Supply of restaurant service other than the services supplied by restaurant eating joints located at specified premises. Tax on service by way of transportation of passengers by an omnibus provided by a company through e-commerce operator is not payable by the e-commerce operator. It will be payable by the company itself. Okay, meaning of various terms. Radio taxi. Radio taxi means a taxi including a radio cab by whatever name called, which is in two-way radio communication with a central control office and is enabled for tracking using GPS or GPRS. Maxi cab means any motor vehicle constructed or adapted to carry more than 6 passengers but not more than 12 passengers, excluding the driver for hire or reward. Motor cab means any motor vehicle constructed or adapted to carry not more than 6 passengers, excluding the driver for hire or reward. Motor car means any motor vehicle other than a transport vehicle, omnibus, road roller, tractor, motorcycle, or invalid carriage. Omnibus means any motor vehicle constructed or adapted to carry more than 6 persons, excluding the driver. Specified premises would mean premises providing hotel accommodation service having declared tariff of any unit of accommodation above 7500 per unit per day or equivalent. Company means a company incorporated under the Companies Act 2013 or any other previous company law. It is important to note here that the above provision shall apply only in case of supply of services. Tax on above services supplied through e-commerce operator shall be paid by the e-commerce operator. All the provisions of the CGST or IGST Act shall apply to such ECO as if he is the supplier liable for paying the tax in relation to the supply of above services. ECO may, on services notified under Section 9, subsection 5, including on restaurant service provided through ECO, pay GST by furnishing the details in Form GSTR 3B, reporting them as outward taxable supplies. In this regard, the following issues have been clarified. ECOs not to collect TCS in respect of restaurant services so notified. ECOs will no longer be required to collect TCS and file Form GSTR 8 in respect of restaurant services on which it pays tax in terms of Section 9 subsection 5. ECOs not required to take separate registration for paying tax on restaurant service supplied through them. As ECOs are already registered in accordance with Rule 8 as a supplier of their own goods and services, there would be no mandatory requirement of taking separate registration by ECOs for payment of tax on restaurant service under Section 9 subsection 5. ECO to pay tax on any restaurant service supplied through them. ECOs will be liable to pay GST on any restaurant service supplied through them, including services supplied by an unregistered person. Supply of restaurant services to be included in aggregate turnover of person supplying restaurant services through ECO. It is clarified that the aggregate turnover of person supplying restaurant service through e-commerce operators shall be computed in accordance with the definition of aggregate turnover under section 2 subsection 6 and shall include the aggregate value of supplies made by restaurant through ECOs. Accordingly, for threshold consideration or any other purpose in the CGST Act, the person providing restaurant service through e-commerce operator shall account for such services in his aggregate turnover. Restaurant services provided through ECO not to be considered as inward supply for e-commerce operators liable to RCM. ECOs are not the recipient of restaurant service supplied through them. Since these are not input services to ECO, these are not to be reported as inward supply in Form GSTR 3B. Reversal of proportionate ITC on input goods and services not required by ECO. ECOs provide their own services as an electronic platform and as an intermediary for which it would acquire inputs or input service on which ECOs avail input tax credit. The ECO charges commission or fee for the service it provides. The ITC is utilized by ECO for payment of GST on services provided by ECO on its own account, say to a restaurant. The situation in this regard remains unchanged even after ECO is made liable to pay tax on restaurant service. ECO would be eligible to ITC as before. Accordingly, it is clarified that ECO shall not be required to reverse ITC on account of restaurant services on which it pays GST in terms of Section 9 subsection 5. It may also be noted that on restaurant service, ECO shall pay the entire GST liability in cash. No ITC could be utilized for payment of GST on restaurant service supplied through ECO. GST to be paid by the supplier on services not notified under Section 9 subsection 5 of CGST Act but supplied through ECO. In respect of supplies not notified under Section 9 subsection 5 but supplied through ECO, the liability to pay GST continues on such supplier and ECO shall deposit TCS on such supplies. ECO to raise invoice in respect of restaurant service supplied through ECO. The invoice in respect of restaurant service supplied through ECO under 9 subsection 5 will be issued by ECO. Billing in case of restaurant service, goods or services other than restaurant service being sold by a restaurant to a customer under the same order. There can be a situation where restaurant service and goods or services other than restaurant service are sold by a restaurant to a customer under the same order. The question arises as to who shall be liable for raising invoices in such cases. Considering that liability to pay GST on supplies other than restaurant service through the ECO and other compliances under the CGST Act, including issuance of invoice to customer, continues to lie with the respective suppliers, and ECOs being liable to collect TCS on such supplies, it is advisable that ECO raises separate bill on restaurant service in such cases where ECO provides other supplies to a customer under the same order. Person liable to pay GST for above specified services when supplied through ECO. If the ECO is located in taxable territory, person liable to pay tax is the e-commerce operator. If the ECO is not does not have physical presence in the taxable territory, person liable to pay tax is the person representing the e-commerce operator. If the e-commerce operator has neither the physical presence nor any representative in the taxable territory, person liable to pay tax is the person appointed by the e-commerce operator for the purpose of paying the tax. Okay, so on that note, we have completed the second segment of the day. Let's go to the third segment, which is page number 56 to 59. Composition levy computation. So the effective rates are, if you are registered under 10 subsection 1, if you are manufacturer other than manufacturer of notified goods, 1% is the effective tax rate. If you are a supplier of restaurant service, you have 5% of GST. Any other supplier for eligible for composition levy under section 10 of CGST Act and chapter 2 of CGST rules, 1% of taxable supplies of goods and services in the state or union territory. Taxpayer toll arm is a manufacturer who has opted for composition levy under section 10 subsection 1, having one unit A1 in UP, another unit A2 in MP. The total turnover of two units in the preceding financial year was 1 crore 15 lakhs or 115 lakhs. Turnover of A1 and A2 in the first quarter of current financial year is 5 lakh and 10 lakh respectively. Compute the amount of tax payable under composition levy under section 10 subsection 1 and 10 subsection 2 by toll arm. A1 and A2 turnover in the previous year is 85 lakhs and 30 lakhs. So total 1 crore 15 lakhs. In the first quarter of this financial year is 5 lakh and 10 lakhs. So just multiply 1% and compute the tax. Illustration 2. Taxpayer Bolaram is a trader who opted for composition levy under section 10 subsection 1 of both taxable and exempt goods. Goods exempted by way of notification. It has one retail showroom A1 in Punjab and another retail showroom A2 in Rajasthan, both selling taxable as well as exempted goods. Total turnover including taxable and exempted goods of the two showrooms in the last financial year was 1 crore 15 lakhs, 85 lakhs and 30 lakhs respectively. Turnover of showrooms A1 and A2 in the first quarter of current financial year is 35 lakhs. A1 is 15 lakhs, rupees 5 lakh from sale of taxable goods and 10 lakhs from sale of exempted goods. A2 is 20 lakhs, rupees 10 lakh from sale of taxable goods and 10 lakh from sale of exempted goods. Compute the amount payable under composition levy under section 10 subsection 1 and 2 of Bolaram. So Punjab, Rajasthan, total turnover in the previous year is 85 lakh and 30 lakhs, 1 crore 15 lakhs. Anyway, the total aggregate turnover has not crossed 1.5 crores. Okay, for this year they will remove all the exempt goods, so they will consider only for the purpose of tax purpose only. They will take 5 lakh from sale of taxable goods and 10 lakh from sale of taxable goods and compute 1% tax on that turnover. Rates of tax in case of composition levy under section 10 subsection 2a. A registered person opting for composition levy under section 10 subsection 2a shall pay tax at 3% of the turnover of supplies of goods and services in the state or union territory. Taxpayer Padmavati is a salon stylist who has opted for composition levy under section 10 subsection 2a, having one branch B1 in Vasant Kunj, Delhi, and another branch B2 in Gurgaon, Haryana. Total turnover of the two branches in the last financial year was 45 lakhs, that is 25 lakhs plus 20 lakh respectively. The turnover of branches B1 and B2 in the first quarter of current financial year is 5 lakh and 10 lakh respectively. Compute the amount payable under composition levy under section 10 subsection 2a of the CGST Act 2017. Okay, turnover in the previous year is less than 50 lakhs, so you are eligible for composition scheme in this year. So in the first quarter your turnover is only 15 lakhs, therefore you are still not affected. You are still not affected by violation. You are eligible to be under composition scheme even now. So 15 lakhs on that, 6% is the effective rate which is given here, 6%. So 6% on 15 lakhs is 90,000. As seen above, since the tax under composition scheme has to be computed as at a specified percentage of turnover in state or turnover in union territory, it is pertinent to understand what is turnover in state or turnover in union territory. Turnover in state or turnover in union territory under composition levy, section 2 clause 112 read with explanation 2 to section 10. As per section 2 clause 112, turnover in state or turnover in union territory means the aggregate value of all taxable supplies excluding the value of inward supplies on which tax is payable by a person on reverse charge basis, and exempt supplies made within a state or union territory by a taxable person, exports of goods or services or both, and interstate supplies of goods or services or both made from the state or union territory by the said taxable person, but excludes central tax, state tax, union territory tax, integrated tax, and cess. Further, explanation 2 to section 10 clarifies that for the purposes of determining the tax payable by a person under this section, the expression turnover in state or union territory in shall not include the value of following supplies, namely supplies from 1st April of a financial year up to the date when such person becomes liable for registration under this act, and exempt supply of services provided by way of extending deposits, the consideration being represented in terms of interest or discount. On combined reading of the aforesaid provisions, the method of computing the turnover in a state or union territory for paying tax under the composition scheme can be depicted in a diagram on the next page. Includes all taxable supplies and exempt supplies made within the state or union territory. While computing turnover in a state or union territory of a supplier other than manufacturer and restaurant service provider eligible for composition levy under section 10 subsection 1, the exempt supplies will not be taken into consideration. Okay, excludes in an CGST, SGST, UTGST, IGST says value of inward supplies on which tax is payable under reverse charge, value of supplies from the first day of April of a financial year up to the date when such person becomes liable for registration under this act, value of exempt supply of services provided by way of extending deposits, loans or advances, insofar as the consideration is represented by way of interest or discount. A photographer, Champak, has commenced providing photography services in Delhi from April this year. His turnover for various quarters till December is as follows: April to June 20 lakhs, July to September 20 lakhs, October to December 20 lakhs. In the given case, since Champak has started the supply of services in the current financial year, his aggregate turnover in the preceding financial year is nil. Consequently, in the current financial year, he is eligible for composition scheme under section 10 subsection 2a. He becomes eligible for the registration when his aggregate turnover exceeds 20 lakhs. While registering under GST, he opts for composition scheme under section 2a. For determining his turnover of the state for payment of tax under composition scheme under section 10 subsection 2a, his turnover of April to June quarter 20 lakhs shall be excluded, as the values of supplies from the first day of April of a financial year up to the date when such person becomes liable for registration under this act are to be excluded for this purpose. On the next 30 lakhs, he shall pay tax at 6%, that is CGST 90,000, SGST 90,000. By the end of July to September quarter, his aggregate turnover reaches 50 lakhs. Consequently, his option to avail composition scheme under section 10 subsection 2a shall lapse by the end of July or September quarter, and thereafter he is required to pay tax at the normal rate of 18%. Thus, the tax payable for October to December quarter is 20 lakh into 18%, that is 3,60,000. While computing aggregate turnover for determining Champak's eligibility to pay tax under composition scheme, value of supplies from the first day of April of a financial year up to the date when such person becomes liable for registration are included. So we completed whatever we have studied previously, we have revised them. Now let us read next. Now let us go to the next segment, which is we will read the fresh pages for the day. Who are not eligible to opt for composition scheme? 10 subsection 2 and 2a. Registered person who is not eligible for composition scheme under 10 subsection 1. Supplier engaged in making any supply of goods or services which are not leviable to tax. Supplier engaged in making any interstate outward supplies of goods or services. Okay. Person applying any services through an electronic commerce operator who is required to collect tax at source under section 52. Okay. Manufacturer of ice cream, pan masala, tobacco, aerated waters, fly ash bricks, fly ash aggregate, fly ash blocks, bricks of fossil meals or similar siliceous earths, building bricks, earthen and roofing tiles, no composition. Supplier who is either a casual taxable person or a non-resident taxable person and a supplier of services save as provided in section subsection 1. They are not eligible for save as provided in 10 subsection 1. Under 10 subsection 1, supplier of services cannot take registration. Okay. Registered person who is not eligible for composition scheme under 10 2a. Supplier engaged in making supply of goods or services which are not leviable to tax. Supplier engaged in making any interstate outward supplies of goods or services. Person supplying any services through an e-commerce operator who is required to collect tax at source. Manufacturer of notified goods or supplier of notified services. And then supplier who is either a casual person or non-resident person. So if I am a service provider, I cannot get registered under 10 subsection 1. I can get registered under 10 subsection 2a, and then all the other disqualification will apply. Section 52 relating to TCS has been discussed in detail, chapter 14. Okay. There is no restriction on composition supplier to receive interstate inward supplies of goods or services. Okay. A person engaged in marginal supply of services other than restaurant service also eligible for composition scheme under 10 subsection 1. second proviso to 10 subsection 1 read with 10 subsection 2 clause A. Fundamentally, the composition scheme under 10 subsection 1 can primarily be available in respect of goods and only one service, namely restaurant service. However, there are cases where a manuf- However, there are cases where a manufacturer or trader is also engaged in supply of services other than restaurant service, though the percentage of such services is very small as compared to the supplies of goods. There may also be cases where a restaurant service provider is also engaged in supply of a small percentage of other services with a view to enable such taxpayers to avail the benefit of the composition scheme under 10 subsection 1. Second proviso to section 10 subsection 1 permits marginal supply of services for a specified value along with the supply of goods or restaurant service as the case may be. The specified value is not exceeding 10% of turnover in a state or union territory in the preceding financial year or 5 lakhs, whichever is higher. Thus, it can be inferred that where the turnover of a registered person opting for composition scheme under section 10 subsection 1 is up to 50 lakhs in the preceding financial year, he can supply services other than restaurant services up to a maximum of 5 lakhs in the current financial year. Further, where the turnover of a registered person opting for composition scheme is more than 50 lakh and up to 1.5 crore in the preceding financial year, he can supply services other than restaurant service in the current financial year up to a maximum value of 10% of turnover in the preceding financial year. Ram Sevak is engaged in supply of goods. His turnover in the preceding financial year is 60 lakhs. Since his aggregate turnover in the preceding financial year does not exceed 1.5 crores, he is eligible for composition scheme under section 10 subsection 1 in the current financial year. Further, in current financial year, he can supply services other than restaurant services up to a value of not exceeding 10% of 60 lakhs, that is 6 lakhs or 5 lakhs, whichever is higher. Thus, he can supply services up to a value of 6 lakhs in the current financial year. If the value of services supplied exceeds 6 lakhs, he becomes ineligible for the composition scheme under section 10 subsection 1. Interest income to be excluded for determining the value of turnover in a state or union territory under second proviso to section 10 subsection 1. Explanation to second proviso to section 10 subsection 1. Generally, businesses tend to save and invest money in the form of deposits, loan or advances. However, this way they get engaged in supply of service by way of extending deposits, loan or advances, a service other than restaurant service, and where the income from such services cause the value of services supplied to exceed the value referred to in second proviso to section 10 subsection 1, that is 10% of turnover in the preceding financial year in a state or union territory or 5 lakh is higher, the said business would have become ineligible for the composition scheme under section 10 subsection 1, and one has to opt out of the composition scheme. This can cause a lot of hardship to small businesses. In view of the above, an explanation is inserted after second proviso to section 10 subsection 1 to clarify that for the purposes of second proviso to section 10 subsection 1, the value of supply of exempt services by way of extending deposits, loans or advances in so far as the consideration is represented by way of interest or discount shall not be taken into account for determining the value of turnover in a state or union territory. Under second proviso to section 10 subsection 1, a registered person opting for composition scheme may supply services other than restaurant services of value not exceeding 10%. Under second proviso to section 10 subsection 1, a registered person opting for composition scheme may supply services other than restaurant service of value not exceeding 10% of the turnover in the preceding financial year in a state or union territory or 5 lakhs whichever is higher. Thus, while computing value of services as referred in this proviso, interest on loans or deposit will not be taken into account. The provisions relating to composition levy discussed hereafter are applicable to both composition levy under section 10 subsection 1 as well as composition levy under section 10 subsection 2a. Conditions and restrictions for composition levy rule 5. Persons opting for composition levy has to comply with the following conditions. He shall pay tax under section 9 subsection 3 or 9 subsection 4 reverse charge on inward supply of goods or services or both. He is neither a casual taxable person nor a non-resident taxable person. He shall mention the words composition taxable person not eligible to collect tax on supplies at the top of the bill on top of the bill of supply issued by him, and he shall mention the words composition taxable person on every notice or signboard displayed at a prominent place at his principal place of business and at every additional place or places of business. Further, where the goods held in stock by him are liable to be taxed under reverse charge under section 9 subsection 4, the tax thereon has been paid under reverse charge under section 9 subsection 4. In addition to the above conditions, a registered person opting for composition scheme under section 10 subsection 1 must not be engaged in the manufacture of goods as notified under section 10 subsection 2 clause E during the preceding financial year. The following goods have been notified hereby by notification dated 7/3/2019. Tariff item subheading heading or chapter 21050000 ice cream and other edible ice whether or not containing cocoa. 21069020 pan masala. So these people cannot be registered under composition supply. All goods, that is tobacco, manufactured tobacco and everything, aerated waters, fly ash bricks, fly ash aggregate, fly ash blocks, bricks of fossil meals or other similar siliceous earths, building bricks, earthen or roofing tiles. The condition applies in case where a builder or promoter opting for composition scheme has the stock of the goods on which he is required to pay GST on reverse charge basis under section 9 subsection 4 in one or more of the following cases. Builder or promoter must purchase at least 80% of input and input services used in supplying the service from registered persons. In case of shortfall, he is required to pay tax under reverse charge on all such inward supplies to the extent short of 80% of the inward supplies from registered supplier. Where cement is received from an unregistered person, promoter or builder has to pay tax on supply of such cement under reverse charge, and GST on capital goods is payable by the promoter on reverse charge basis. Okay, point number 8. Intimation of opting for composition levy rules 3 and 4. Intimation by persons applying for registration. Any person who is not registered and applies for registration may give an option to pay tax under composition levy in part B of the registration form, that is GST REG 01. The same shall be considered as an intimation to pay tax under composition levy. Such intimation shall be considered only after the grant of registration to the applicant. The option to pay tax under composition levy shall be effective from the date from which registration is effective. We will read till the end of this page. The second point is intimation by a registered person. A registered person who opts to pay tax under composition levy scheme shall electronically file an intimation in prescribed form on GST portal. The intimation shall be filed prior to the commencement of the financial year for which said option is exercised. He shall also furnish the statement in prescribed form in accordance with the provisions of Rule 44, Sub-Rule 4 of CGST rules within 60 days from the commencement of the relevant financial year. Any intimation in respect of any place of business in a state or union territory shall be deemed to be an intimation in respect of all other places of business registered on the same PAN. The option to pay tax under composition levy shall be effective from the beginning of the financial year. The person applying for registration can opt for composition scheme at the time of applying for registration, this time being any time of the financial year, and composition levy shall be effective from the date from which registration is effective. A registered person can opt for composition scheme from the beginning of any financial year, and composition levy shall be effective from the beginning of the said financial year. Intimation for opting to pay tax under composition scheme must be filed prior to the commencement of the financial year for which the said option is to be exercised. Okay, so on that note, let us wrap up today's class. Section we have read till page number 3.66. So just let me update 3.60 to 3.66, 30th October 2025. On that note, let us wrap up today's study session, guys. I will see you tomorrow. Thank you and bye bye.